Kate, Sharon, Vale Primary, can you tell us, with what people have seen, how did dyslexia inform or change the teaching here?
Well, I guess that started with, in 2018, I did a lot of training. Sharon let me go to any training that I wanted to go to, so a lot of really good quality presenters. And the message that I was getting from all of them was that if we can get it right for dyslexic children, then that is the very best way to teach all children.
We started this journey because of a teacher who had a personal interest in dyslexia, and she actually did your course first.
Okay, you're
so
right.
One person can make a difference.
Yes, right.
So she came along to me one day and said, I think we've got a decoding issue in the school. We've been focusing on comprehension and text types and all that, all with good intention, getting some results but not consistent, and certainly not past year 3. And then you came out, Bill, and had a look at our data and said that you've got a decoding issue. So that's where we started, and went off to Bentley West and had a look at what they were doing in terms of explicit direct instruction. So that was about 2016, I think. And a number of our staff have done the Playbury training, and going off to Bentley West was an eye-opener as well. Now, since that time, we've had all staff have been trained to that course, and a couple of SSIs as well. So all teachers are trained. So that is basically a course. I know it's around students with dyslexia, but the impact it had on all of our students and scores has been, quite significant. So the dyslexic, I guess all the approaches used around dyslexia just seem to make sense. It's good practice. Yes. So we've really taken a wave 3 or tier 3 intervention and made it a wave 1 approach.
How's that all gone, getting so much knowledge into your teachers in such a short amount of time?
Yeah, so we spent really probably 2016, 17 just building staff knowledge around concepts. Yeah. And when I say staff, I mean myself as well. Yeah. Oh, I didn't know that was a rule, So, and we're still learning, So building staff knowledge around the concepts, so the what you have to teach was one thing, but then building their knowledge around how to teach it. Yes. And why this approach works. So there's been two strands going, but we've spent huge amounts of resourcing and time on staff professional learning. Yes. So, but without that, it's just not going to work anyhow. And staff will actually say, so we've had some teachers come in who are graduate teachers who're saying when they first came, it was like we were talking in a different language. However, now, a year or 2 years on, they can't believe how much they know. Although, even at the beginning, they said teaching the phonology sequence was one of the best parts of their days, because it was really clear to them what they had to teach and how they had to do it. They didn't have to invent it.
Nice, right.
So they felt quite confident with it.
Extensive training for teachers and evidence-based. Yeah. So we used the research that Kate had formulated in 2018, and that was heavily introduced right through the school in 2019. So there was no not sure if this is going to work. We knew it would work. Yeah. But we needed to show them that it was going to work through the evidence-based research that we could present to them. And they just jumped on board straight away.
And we also used the data from our school, our existing data, to show that what we were doing wasn't working.
Right.
So we could say that, this isn't working, we have to change it. We can't keep going on doing the same thing. We're going to get exactly the same results. So that was our basis for making change. Yeah. We weren't using decodable text, we were using predictable text. So we would teach these particular graphemes, and then we would teach kids how to blend using those graphemes, and then we would give them a predictable text that had words in it like garage and penguin. And the only way that they could decode those words, because they didn't know the code for them, was to look at the picture and guess. Right. So they just didn't match. No. And decodable texts are what I call the missing link. Right. And that has been the single best thing that we could have done for our junior primary classes, was to get rid of all of our predictive texts and replace them with decodable texts.
Was it difficult to help teachers understand that you're actually undoing a focus on decoding as a word attack strategy when you send home readers that have grapheme phoneme correspondences the kids haven't seen?
I think our teachers understood that.
Yeah.
The teachers did.
Once we explained it to them.
It was like a light bulb moment for a lot of the teachers, thinking, of course. How can they know that if we haven't taught them that and they're guessing their way through readers? And we don't want children guessing their way through readers.
So what we've noticed for our older students, our Year 6 students, and I think it's something quite different about them closing the gap. So normally, if the children aren't reading where they should be by Year 3, they don't ever seem to be able to close that gap. But what we've noticed, and it's really noticeable, Year 7 students who are having this Wave 1 type of instruction plus intensive Wave 3 support or intervention, they've closed the gap.
And when people think about intervention, the old style of thinking is to go, well, how long should it take for a student before we spit them out at the other end of an intervention? What do you think about that thinking?
We think that they need to be an intervention for as long as it takes.
The common question is, what about the kids that didn't start that way? What's happening?
We feel really bad about it.
We've let them down, and really we've failed them. So when we did the Acadience testing, we do that across the school. We looked at all the children from 3 to 7 that fell in that box that just weren't getting it. So I released another teacher, a Year 7 teacher, out of the class for the year to start doing exactly what Kate's done in 2019. She started this year full-time out of the class, and she's now working the same process that's happening in our ARDA 2 with all of the children that have missed it 3 to 7, and including our 7s, because we want to catch them up as much as we can before they get to high school.
Yeah.
That ended up being 90 children.
So at the moment, we've got 90 kids who are kind of catching up, if you like.
Yep.
So talk us through what this has meant for intervention.
We went from a school that had no intervention.
Yeah.
We had some articulation intervention in reception,
yes,
and that was the extent of our intervention. So we've gone from that to, we now have a full-time SSO who does articulation intervention. In term 1 she does oral language intervention with our receptions, and then she does phonological awareness intervention with our lowest receptions.
Right.
And then we have a full-time SSO who runs Autumn Gillingham multisensory learning intervention with our Year 1s and 2s, and she works with 40 children. And then we have 2 full-time SSOs who work with the 3 to 7, those 90 children that Sharon was talking about. And that's also the Autumn Gillingham multisensory learning based intervention.
So at the moment, it's kind of, well, I guess it's catch-up football, isn't it, with that group of kids who didn't get this type of Tier 1 teaching. A lot of people would say, gee, that must be expensive to not let these kids slip, to actually say, no, it's not good enough that we let them slip. How are you affording it?
So the 3 to 7, we do have, some of the children get the ISP grants.
Yes.
So we have used some of that creatively to allow it, but a lot of it has come out of school funds. And we'd already had some come off of intervention. So they were in there, quite low, tested mid-year, they're where they should be.
So let's talk about engagement. When people first have a look at schools who pioneered this, like Bentley West, they'll watch that and can be initially horrified by seeing a really structured mode of teaching. What were your first impressions, and has your thinking changed?
So my first impressions when the one teacher came to me was, oh my goodness, where are we going back to? And I still find it a bit, oh, there's rows in the classroom. But we gave it a go because we needed to do something that would work, and it just made sense. And as we started looking to the brain and the frontal lobing and how that all works, things started to make sense. And from my observations of students previously, they could go a whole lesson without getting their book out, no one noticed. But within these structures, you're noticed straight away if you're not doing the learning. So its time on task has increased hugely across the school. And what we also found, we did a little bit of our own research, and even through maths, and giving kids a problem just to go off and try and work it out. We'd watch kids just flounder, try the same way over and over and over. So then teachers did their own little action research. Explicitly teach the concept first, make sure they've got that, then do the problem or the applying it into an unfamiliar context. Kids were far more successful.
Yes.
So we know this context that the explicit instruction works.
So with EDI, or explicit direct instruction, a lot of people look at that from the outside, and it can rub people the wrong way because they see what people saw in the footage. Kids doing the same thing involving choral response to certain things, grapheme, phoneme correspondence, and it looks to people like drill. Talk me through that. Was that challenging for some people on staff to start to teach that way?
It definitely was challenging for some teachers. We have some teachers who love inquiry-based learning.
Yeah.
And there's definitely a place for inquiry-based learning. But children, and we found that our children didn't have the skills to be able to do inquiry-based learning. And so there's a place for explicit teaching, and there's a place for inquiry-based learning. And those teachers are seeing that now, that it's not all that. You cannot teach explicit direct instruction. You cannot do it all day, every day. Right. It's exhausting, as it.
No.
But so it is a certain parts of the day, and it's where new content needs to be taught. It has to be explicit. It has to be direct. We don't have time for children to find these things out themselves.
No.
We need to teach it to them. This is what it is, and then they need to practice it, and they need to have repetition. They need to make it multisensory, which you would have seen.
Yes.
Those children were not bored. They are engaged. From beginning to end. They enjoy it.
I mean, and I, as much as anyone, probably push the constructivist agenda, but there is a place.
Yes.
So what I talk about to staff is there's a time. It's not about what's better; it's when.
Yes.
So we still do inquiry, and we would look at questions in science, but kids have been explicitly taught all the literacy and numeracy concepts they need first to be able to do that. Because, as I said, otherwise you found kids just floundering.
Yes. And then you get the behaviour issues which will come with. Yeah.
And what have you done? Nothing by the end of the lesson. And even how we set up the classrooms, teachers have done a lot of thinking about what works best in the physical setup of the classroom. And I think over the years we've put kids in groups, and I don't know that it was all well researched. I think we just did things, but teachers are now mindful of can I check for understanding continually? So you'll notice the kids don't just get lectured at, they're actually engaged in doing something, and it's checked all the time and corrected. So immediate feedback. So make sure kids can all see, that sort of thing.
So this is management of distraction, which ends up being management of cognitive load.
Yep.
Also, all supported in the cognitive psychology around memory
Talk to me about repetition.
I think that was one of the big things that we weren't doing in junior primary, particularly I know in my class, teaching receptions. We would teach, like I said, we'd teach phonological awareness. I would teach syllables at the beginning of the year. All my kids have got syllables. They can identify syllables in words. They know what a syllable is. And I would then move on to something else. And then not touch on syllables again for the rest of the year. And then these kids would start in year one, no idea what a syllable is.
Yeah.
So it didn't actually make its way into long-term memory at all. And we were finding that, hang on, this is what they're doing in maths too. Year one teachers would think, did you even teach this in maths? They've forgotten this, they've forgotten that. And so much of what we were teaching just wasn't making it into long-term memory. So repetition is everything. We have those card decks. They get to review them over and over again. And that happens in all of our classrooms. The concepts, with the words, the rules. Tell me what that rule is again.
Yes.
Everything just gets repeated constantly. And you can see that the things that have been taught recently are done more often.
Yes.
But they'll always revisit back to other graphemes and other rules that they've learned. all throughout the year.
So you're now into this business of spaced retrieval practice, which makes everyone have to think about what do you review, when do you tail off your review of certain content, which is just what we know from cognitive psychology about how memory works.
And some children might need more, but through formative assessment, through the pop sticks, through the whiteboards, if you saw the whiteboards being used, it's easy for a teacher to know this child needs more, and they will use their SSO support. If they've really gone over it quite a few times, the SSO support will then pull them and they'll go over it again.
So these kids don't need different teaching, they just need more rehearsal of the same stuff. Yep, so just more exposure.
They get their tier 1 in the class, teacher identifies through formative assessment very quickly, and then within the next day they're targeted to redo that work.
The diagnostic
redo that learning. It's instant.
And teachers will also notice if certain errors are appearing in children's writing. They'll incorporate that into their review. Right, we need to revisit that. So they'll adjust as they go. Everything, and this is what I hear from the teachers now, every single thing that they do is done with a purpose. They know what they're doing, why they're doing it. Everything is intentional.
And teachers are very excited.
Yes.
They're really excited about what they're seeing the kids, what they can do.
People I'm sure people who watched the receptions in there were aghast when they heard a child use the term schwa. When they heard a reception child talk about the floss rule. I jotted a few things down. It was the meta-language. The language about language is just stunning.
It is. It is for 5-year-olds to be able to, and they can speak to you about a schwa and what it is and where you find it. And it's just amazing that they can do that. It's so exciting.
Well, for a start, we noticed the routines are really supportive of kids in our school and the complex kids in our school. There's no guessing. You know what you have to do every day. You know where you're seated. There's no room for distraction. The kids have to do the learning, as you would have seen, that everyone is engaged and are expected to engage. So there's high expectations around that too. We find we had to think of ways of managing the high mobility of the community and kids coming in at all different levels. And we found by having strong routines, that's been really supportive of those children. We've just found the no distractions approach. We're getting a lot more learning time.
We taught synthetic phonics using Jolly Phonics, but then I guess doing all the research, it teaches you to be really, really critical of what you're... And no one program has the answer to everything.
No.
There's going to be gaps in any program you use. So it taught us to be really, really critical of what we were doing and what programs were out there. And we decided to create our own.
Your own scope and sequence.
Yes, so we have our own scope and sequence for everything. We have our own grapheme sequence, which then fits in with our decodable readers. So we have assessments that go with our decodable readers. We have our own keywords that go with each of our graphemes to help as a memory hook. And it's based loosely on Bartek's Reader Doctor because we use that in our school and we wanted to have that connection between that as well. So it just started from that and we started building it and we've incorporated different things. So when we are looking at phonological awareness, we wanted to use Heggerty as our whole class structure because it's fabulous for that. But then we soon realised that the children who weren't getting Heggerty, they actually needed to be explicitly taught the skills. And Heggerty doesn't explicitly teach the skills. It's great practice, it's great whole class review. So then we went to David Kilpatrick's training, looked at his book and his assessments, and so that's what we use now for our intervention. So it's a matter of working out what it is that we needed, what is the very best thing that we can use for that, doing lots of research.
I think as a leader, what has been really important is that the leaders get in there and do the learning with the staff and go in and try. Like I'll go in and teach the lessons because it's okay for me to go off and do some training and development with adults and not really understand how it works in the classroom. But when you go and try it in a classroom, then you can see how it needs to work. So, and especially taking a tier 3 intervention into a tier 1, there had tier 1 there had to be some adjustments around how that would look. So I think it's really important that leaders actually get in, do the learning, and also go in and do some teaching, and make sure you're observing what's going on.
Yeah. It is utterly refreshing to hear a school leader talk about curriculum leadership, about the art of teaching this, because one thing that I've seen in common with all the schools that succeeded, leaders have gone, I've got a knowledge gap, I've got to get in there, and I can't ask these people to do something that I can't do myself.
That's right.
So teacher knowledge. Teachers are flat out. How have you managed asking, or how have teachers managed being asked to change what they do, which brings with it a programming load, a creating materials load. How have you helped teachers to manage a transition?
By lots and lots of support.
Yeah.
So we have done lots of things that actually reduces their workload.
Yep.
For example, with our cadence testing, which we wanted to, we knew that we needed to replace running records. We can't do a running record on a decodable book, and if we're using decodable books, and we need something else to assess reading across the school. So we looked at a cadence testing. With that, we made sure that we had all the resources ready for the teachers, so they didn't have to do that. We provided them with release time, and we provided them with some training and some support. So myself and the other literacy coordinator, we sat with them, we talked them through it, we showed them how to do it, and then guided them through that. I gathered all the data, I compiled all the data, and gave it back to them so that they didn't have to do that. So it's when you're asking them to do big change like that, you don't want to increase their workload.
No.
But once they can actually see, hey, this is actually useful data, this is actually helping me work out where my kids are at, so they can see the purpose of it.
Yes.
And I guess the other thing would be teacher knowledge.
Yes.
We realised that, we needed to make all of our teachers, and not just our teachers but our SSOs who work with our kids at the lower end, we needed to make them experts in all parts of teaching children how to read. So we've invested quite a lot of time and money into training.
Yes.
We've done quite a lot of whole school training. We had 3 days where yourself came out and did whole school training with our teachers and our SSOs. We've sent the whole school to EDI training so that they could learn about that. I've done lots of training with our SSOs to skill our SSOs up, and we've sent people to David Kilpatrick, to Lynn Stone, to Bartek Rakowski.
Yes, you've been over to Bentley West and had a look.
We've been over to Bentley West.
We were meant to go again, but, and we were sending quite a number in March, but that was cancelled.
Yes.
We'll just have to wait, won't we?
We will.
Yeah. So our school has never spent so much.
And the business manager said to me, she said she's been here over 30 years, and she said, we have never spent so much on professional learning at this school since I started. So she's a little bit, she doesn't like spending money, but she said this is amazing how much is going
it's so important
for teacher professional learning.
And I guess the other thing, we make sure we resource this. So we have time, we provide time for teachers to meet on a Friday I employ my NIT staff along so that children don't have to be taken by TRTs. Yep. The NIT teachers know the routine as well. So teachers get time to meet, to observe, to talk, to plan together and to build their knowledge together, and that's really important that we give time and resources to it.
Hattie's collective teacher efficacy comes to mind.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah. And the other bit is we make sure we do things like everyone's got a professional library, and in that library are all the texts that you will need to be able to teach at this school. Rather than one person's got them. So we figured, like, if you're going to teach EDI, you need that book. If you've got, so everybody's got what they need.
So Sharon, tell us, so you're reading recovery trained?
Yes, so I trained as a reading recovery teacher in the late 90s.
Yep.
So I trained Catholic Ed, and then it became really big in the department.
So what's different about what you're doing now as opposed to what you were doing?
Oh, this is getting all of my kids, all of my bottom kids, the ones I'm worried about at the moment, they are all moving.
Right.
and I'm not having to take them out and do one-to-one with them because they're getting it within the class.
Oh, well, so it's capturing more kids.
Absolutely capturing more kids.
What are the main differences in the approach from reading recovery to this?
So much more systematic.
Yep.
So explicit.
Yep.
I know exactly how to explain something to a child.
Right.
So exactly how to explain it. There's no guessing.
Yes, okay. And that was my next question. On the topic of how kids attack words, talk me through the differences you've noticed about word attack strategies with reading recovery as opposed to this way of teaching.
Look at the picture. Get your mouth ready.
Yeah.
Does it sound right?
Yep.
Now I'm saying, look at the word.
Yep.
Giving them a prompt.
Yep.
As in fan.
Yep.
Just chalk and cheese.
So now your kids are paying attention to
the print.
To the print.
They only look at the print.
To every grapheme, paying attention
yep.
to every phoneme in that
yep.
speech stream.
Yep.
Yep. Okay. So it's one of the key differences is the 3 cueing
yep.
versus decoding.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
And because they're decoding, they're getting so much comprehension. So one of my children went out to recess yesterday and I said, oh, do you think you're funny? And she said, no, I think I'm hilarious. So when people say they're missing vocab and
yeah.
comprehension, it's all transferring.
Yes.
Because that was my big concern
yes.
was that they were going to miss that rich language and
yes.
the meaning and the comprehension. But no, they are reading these books. And
so that common criticism of explicit direct instruction with a synthetic phonics base
yep.
about kids will miss out on the richness of language,
yep.
you're not seeing that?
No, that was my concern.
Yeah.
I mean, because I went in as a running record, you know, I've trained lots
yeah.
and hundreds of people to take running records,
yes.
and that was my concern. How am I going to track kids know where they are?
Yeah.
How am I going to know they're comprehending? But
and it's taken care of itself.
This is my second year, and there is no way on earth I would take a running record on a kid.